Hi, Canada. As you might have heard, the Quebec government has presented a bill, Bill 96, which would make changes and updates to its language laws, among other things. You might also have heard all sorts of wildly inaccurate things about how the bill changes the Canadian Constitution in various media and op-eds from people who, frankly, seem more interested in baiting your clicks than properly informing you. I'm a Quebecois, an Anglophone, a Federalist. I have 2 law degrees, and I've read through Bill 96, all 100 pages of it. I've turned off all monetization of this video, and wherever possible, I'm going to refer to primary sources that you can easily look up yourself. So let's take 5 minutes to talk about what Bill 96 actually does. Before we can get into the specifics of how Bill 96 affects the Constitution, we need to have a short aside on the Constitution of Canada itself. Our proximity to the United States sometimes causes a lot of confusion here. Unlike the United States, which has explicitly reduced its constitution to a single revered document, Canada's constitution is made up of a series of formal acts, laws, treaties, judgments, and ever-evolving unwritten practices and principles. This is by design. In fact, it's explicitly stated so in the preamble to the Constitution Act of 1867, also known as the British North America Act, which states that Canada has a constitution similar in principle to that of the United Kingdom. The Constitution Acts of 1867 and 1982 are 2 important parts of Canada's constitution, but they are not one and the same as Canada's constitution itself. And when our media refers to these 2 laws as the Constitution as a whole, that's the United States cultural influence at work. We make incremental changes to our constitution all the time, through new practices and important court decisions, and we don't raise much of a fuss about it. While some parts of the Constitution Acts are more rigid, they're not meant to be set in stone, and it's perfectly within our constitutional traditions to treat them as flexible. That being said, out of the 100-page bill, by far the most ink has been spilled in English-language Canadian media about Article 159, which amends the Constitution Act of 1867 to include 2 sections after Section 90 of that act. They are 90Q1, Quebecers form a nation, and 90Q2, French shall be the only official language of Quebec. It is also the common language of the Quebec nation. The bill does not affect the Constitution Acts or any other constitutional law, act, treaty, or judgment in any other way. So first, you might wonder where Quebec, a province, gets the authority to modify the Constitution Acts. And the answer is, well, within the Constitution Acts themselves. Section 45 of the Constitution Act of 1982 explicitly states that subject to Section 41, which we will get to later, the legislation of each province may exclusively make laws amending the constitution of the province. This is the part I think is causing a lot of confusion. With Bill 96, Quebec isn't modifying Canada's constitution, it's amending Quebec's constitution. It just so happens that certain parts of Quebec's constitution are found within the Constitution Act of 1867, which makes sense when you remember that Quebec, like Ontario, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, were formally constituted as provinces by the same act. The Constitution Acts therefore also include many province-specific sections, including province-specific language rights for New Brunswick, that make up part of these provinces' constitutions. And in recognition of this, the Constitution Acts specifically allow the provinces to amend them for themselves. This has been established practice for a long time and is not controversial. So now let's look at the 2 sections being proposed. First, the Quebecers form a nation. This gets twisted into all sorts of interpretations because of the ambiguity around the word nation. But to simplify it, nation does not mean the same thing as nation-state. Stating that Quebec is a nation here is no different than recognizing that the First Nations are nations, a group of people with a shared political and cultural identity. This doesn't imply a weakening of links with the Canadian Federation any more than the existence of the Texas National Guard implies Texas is no longer part of the United States, or that recognizing the nation of France rebuffs the existence of the European Union. This also shouldn't be controversial, because the Canadian Parliament itself recognized the existence of the Quebec nation almost 15 years ago in 2006. The second section, asserting that French is the only official language of Quebec and the common language of the Quebec nation, is a bit more complicated. Sections 41C and 43B of the Constitution Act of 1982 require approval of the federal government for any changes that a province can make to its own constitution as it relates to the use of English and French within that province. It's possible, but not entirely clear, that this would apply here. Bill 96 amends Quebec's constitution to declare that French is its only official language and its common language, but it doesn't amend any of the actual constitutionally fixed rights to the use of English within Quebec, including the right to use English in its courts and legislature. So there's a good argument to be made that since this doesn't limit the constitutionally protected uses of English in Quebec, according to the Constitution Acts themselves, it doesn't require Ottawa's approval at all. I'm not saying it's clear-cut. I'm just saying that, like so many things about our Constitution, it's a gray area that will require discussion and negotiation between our federal and provincial governments. And in a healthy federal state, that's a good thing. At any rate, our federal government has indicated that it agrees, in principle, with the proposed changes Bill 96 makes to Quebec's constitution. And why shouldn't it? There are still certainly points within Bill 96 that will need to be debated and ironed out as part of our legislative process, but they go beyond what could be addressed in a single 5-minute video. All Quebecois should have their concerns heard by their provincial representatives. I've written to mine. But by and large, Bill 96 is a moderate, reasonable bill that keeps existing Anglophone rights intact and actually promotes Quebec's involvement with communities across Canada. It proposes a lot of good things for Quebec and for Canada, and that largely aligns with Canada's existing language rights and cultural policies. So please, take any sensationalist criticism you might hear about the bill with a hefty dose of skepticism. I know not everyone has time to read through the bill in its entirety, but when making up your mind, at least try to get as many nuanced and in-depth analyses and opinions as you can, including those expressed in French if possible, that refer to the bill and what it actually does, rather than some polemicists' outrage-driven narratives that only really skim the surface. Our discourse, our Constitution, and our country will be better for it.